Trump's coming war in China. And I think it does also broach a subject about our internationalism in the post-COVID-19 world. I'm going to argue now that we have to continue to be anti-racist, anti-war, and anti-nuclear, because those are the three fundamental issues that this whole escalation brings up fundamentally. The first point, anti-racist. I think there's a simple message here. We've got to say no to xenophobia, anti-Chinese prejudice, and yes to global cooperation. Since the Chinese New Year in London, I have noticed increase in anti-Chinese prejudice, which has been confirmed by figures from the Met Police. We've seen Chinatown hit during the Chinese New Year before the whole lockdown by a decrease in trade. And these regressive attitudes have not been helped clearly by Mr. Trump's utterances. When he's been referring to the virus, he's always referred to it as a Chinese virus, for example. And ultimately, if we're going to defeat this pandemic threat, it's going to involve it needs international cooperation, both medically and economically. That's quite clear. And I think it's very pertinent what the German president recently said, Frank-Walter Steinmeier, that it's actually not a war, the analogy that most world leaders use, but a test for humanity to get together and fight this battle against this virus. So that's the anti-racist angle that we should continue with on this front. The second thing is actually the anti-war emphasis. What the US needs desperately, as well as the world, is a cure to the virus and not more war. The greatest threat to the US isn't this supposed foreign adversary, but the virus. And yet their budget priorities don't reflect this at all. They're spending $1.3 trillion more on military expenditure with this since the pivot to Asia, which is essentially East Asia and China. When actually they need to spend the money on research for a vaccine, getting a focus on test tracking and isolating, and this when they've already had over 100,000 fatalities in the US. There is no justification, quite honestly, domestically, certainly in American politics. Yet, whilst this has all been happening, what has President Trump been up to? He's launched the Space Force, would you believe it? The American military presence now has been extended not just across the whole of the earth, land, sea, air, but also into space now formally. And that's why the UN and Stop the War during the lockdown globally to the pandemic, we've called for a ceasefire on all military conflicts because that's the only way we can focus on the true fight that we've got on hand. And finally, the final point, I think as internationalists, we've got to continue being anti-nuclear. Trump's America certainly is threatening nuclear peace. One of the main manifestations of America First policy has been them trashing multinationalism. It's not just the World Health Organization. They've done this with the Nuclear Proliferation Treaty, which is in its 50th anniversary. And whether you like it or not, it has actually helped keep the nuclear threat at bay. But it's now really doomed because it's actually escalated a competition between the USA, Russia, and now China to modernize their nuclear arsenal. We've had other treaties fall in the wayside, and that includes the Iranian nuclear deal, and more recently, the nuclear test ban. So in that light, I think we've also got to continue as internationalists our anti-nuclear campaigning on top of our anti-war campaigning and anti-racism.